I'm Gerson Borrero, editor-at-large at City and State, and on this portion, I'm going to explain the wearing of the glasses. Nobody punched me, so don't rejoice, my enemies. Actually, I have something wrong with my right eye, and it doesn't look too good, so I'm worried. Having said that, producer here, Brian Terry, forced me to say that so that it doesn't look like somebody beat me up. We're here joined today with Antonio Martínez II. He's an attorney. He's been traveling to Cuba. This is like an update on the Cuba historical events that have been occurring. Antonio, you've been traveling to Cuba since 1999.
Yes.
And fast forward to all these things that are happening, we saw the raising of the flag in a very, I think, significant, partially emotional ceremony. Secretary of State John Kerry in La Habana, Cuba. Just having
historic.
that, it was amazing to see that and what he's. I didn't even know that John Kerry spoke Spanish, and he actually, and that wasn't like flying, winging it.
Secretary Kerry is actually very intelligent, brilliant man. He speaks several languages.
Okay, I
and
wasn't
he had
aware.
Spanish, he had French.
He should have done that during the campaign, but we'll regress there. Tell me, as a person who you've been ahead of the curve, you know what's involved.
I predicted this day. I dreamed of this day when I went to Cuba in 1999. I foresaw the day that the United States and Cuba will restore relations and eventually will reconcile. I still believe that in my dream and my vision that I had back then, the President of the United States went to Cuba, and the day of the reconciliation of the United States and Cuba really was celebrated. It's long overdue. It's something that it's in our strategic and best interests of our country to have normal relations and normal trade with Cuba. And it also changes our whole tenor of the relations with the rest of our neighbors in Latin America.
So in a way, I don't want to get into the political end. So Fidel wrote extensively and said that la historia me absolverá. History will absolve me. So you think Fidel Castro this is the beginning of that absolution from history? Because I mean, to hear a president of the United States actually say what he said is amazing, but we're not here to talk about that. You've gone beyond the politics, I think, and you have managed to go to Cuba, see some of the transformation, but also the stubbornness of that government, because they're not going to do things just for the sake of doing it the way the U.S. wants it to do it, or any other nation. They have certain principles, certain rules that they're having, and some of it is not sitting well with people here in the United States that don't understand what this is all about.
Well, I think a couple of things. I think the ultimate judge of Fidel Castro will be the Cuban people. Those are the people who ultimately judge, because he was their leader. Fidel has retired, and his brother Raul is there. Well, I know.
He hasn't retired from the Communist,
right.
the Cuban Communist Party, and that's the organ that runs it.
Sure.
But again, I got to force myself back here.
I think that it's really important that when we look at the issue of U.S.-Cuba relations and where things are going, you have to look at context. Address it in context. What stands out about U.S.-Cuba history? And you have to study your history. Some of what's happening right now, something that's maybe what we might find discomforting, really stems from history. We have to look at the history of the United States with Cuba. We militarily occupied it. We basically ran it, controlled it. And since the Cuban Revolution in 1959, they basically had an independent government that they could say that the United States didn't control or manipulate.
But that government established rejected capitalism. And now, which is why I want to talk about this, they're embracing, in a way, capitalism. They're welcoming it back.
They have to, because they went off to extremes. So, anything, there's a principle, Gerson, that, and this is a Buddhist principle, which is never go to the extremes.
Is the Buddhist?
No, it's the Buddhist.
Okay,
but there's a principle that say don't go to extremes. Find the middle way.
Okay.
And so I think Cuba has realized that there are serious limitations to their economic system. However, we're also up against human nature, and in the dynamics of diplomacy, international relations, we have to be sensitive. No one likes to be told they were wrong. They have to come to that conclusion, and it has to be done with sensitivity and in a manner, because we didn't have a war. This wasn't like had a military conflict where there was a clear victor and a loser. This was an engagement. We've had a Cold War, and this has been an ideological war. This has been
it's been an economic,
yes,
with a mighty weapon, and it's been used.
But it hurt us, and it hurt Cuba.
Okay, so let's get beyond it, Gerson.
Yeah.
There's right now. We recently had a trip. City and State has we did a whole issue on the visit of Andrew Cuomo's trade initiatives, which I don't know where they're at right now. As I understand it, everything is just waiting, like everything is going to have to wait. But New York State took an initiative. We're talking here at City and State, New York. With regards to that, there is an misconception by some to push even the fact that if you do business in Cuba, now in this current climate, you're still just working with the government keeps all. I know that that's a falsehood. For example, when New York State, the governor visited Cuba, that was a formal relationship of companies with government, but there is the recent statement by New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez saying that all business that you do in Cuba is with the government and they take a percentage of it. Is that true? What do you find in Cuba? What's the system set up right now?
That's not an accurate statement. There is they have a different economic system. They have a centralized economy. Mm-hmm. I think they grapple with the inefficiencies and the problems that you referred to just a few minutes ago. There is an emerging private sector. Look, the Cuban government said, we are going to authorize a whole host of private sector, private self-employed positions. There's over 200 of them. I have a list of them here if you wanted to.
These
are a list. Now, is it a perfect list? Absolutely not. But at least it's a start, and it's a realization and an admission that they can't manage and control everything from a central economic planning control, government control model. They have to allow free market forces because the free market forces exist there already. I can tell you, for example.
So they're encouraging entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And
they're doing it carefully. They're doing it slowly and carefully.
So if Gerson Borrero was in Cuba and I'm a Cubano, and you go representing, in other words, I can sell you food, I can set up a restaurant, I can
stay at your house, you can set up a bed and breakfast, and I can stay at your house.
Okay, and and the government doesn't take anything from.
Well, they pay their taxes.
Like here.
Yeah, everybody, yeah. Any organized civil society has a government, and everybody pays taxes.
And good hands that they put their hands in your okay, we got that. So there's no difference.
And their justification of their argument is, well, they're providing, because I've asked, they provide everybody with universal health care, and everybody can go to college who wants to go, tuition free.
Right. So when Bob Menendez, as the Democrat from New Jersey, senator, who also happens to be totally anti-current Cuba and the communist Cuba and the Castros, when he says this, it's a misstatement. It's not really dealing with the reality. It's like New Jersey paying local taxes, state taxes, and federal taxes. Is that more equivalent what we're talking about? That's the difference, or does the Cuban government want more? Is there like an additional fee?
I don't have that particular information.
With entrepreneurs, I'm talking about.
Well, with entrepreneurs, they pay a license fee and then they pay taxes like everybody else in Cuba.
Like you would do here in New York City.
Yeah.
So where is this misconception or this thing or the spin that somehow, well, I guess New York City government keeps some of your money, New York State keeps some of your money, and the feds keep some of your money. So are you saying that more or less is how it works?
I mean, for these particular occupations, yes, but there are also challenges in the private sector. For example.
How so?
Okay. So let's say you are an artisan and you make humidors.
For cigars.
For cigars. If you, as a privately employed humidor maker, I can buy those humidors from you, and I can import them into the United States. The State Department on February 13th published a list of goods and services produced by independent Cuban entrepreneurs that are eligible for importation into the United States. And so,
and that includes cigars?
Not cigars.
Not cigars.
That's about, but the humidors, yes. But here's the challenge: I can't.
So the cigar that you gave me before is contraband?
No, it's not contraband. It was within that limit of, you're
allowed
to bring $100 of Cuban cigars and rum when you visit there. The humidors, I can buy them from you and I can bring them with me to the United States. However, there isn't a mechanism yet in Cuba where you, the Cuban humidor maker, can export those humidors to me in the United States.
And that's because of the embargo.
And that is because of the Cuban infrastructure. There isn't a mechanism within their system to allow this private exportation.
So it's on their side.
There's a problem there on their side, absolutely. This process that we're undergoing right now of normalization, people have to remember there are two sides to this equation. There's an American side with American law, American regulations, and there's a Cuban side with Cuban law and Cuban regulations. And whoever goes through those waters, navigates through those waters, you have to be aware of both. And so some people I've encountered, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm right now, but I would say there's a little bit of ignorant exuberance about Cuba. People forget there is an embargo.
Is that what happened? Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is an embargo. There are travel restrictions. You just can't get up and say, oh, I'm going to go to Cuba and I'm going to go hang out at the beach and just chill out. You have there are restrictions, and I can't call up American Airlines and say, hey, let me get on the next flight out in JFK to Havana. It isn't like that.
Did Governor Andrew Cuomo jump the gun on this? Because there's nothing going to happen here from New York State. We're not going to get apples sold to Cuba anytime soon. We're not going to have grapes. We're not going to have wine. None of that is going to happen anytime soon. We're not going to have yogurt, definitely, sold to Cuba. I know that there's still...
Well, we're going to have... We still are going to have... we have JetBlue finally engaged, and we also have a cancer vaccine that deserves attention and should be included. I mean, Cuba's health products, they have some serious products that are worthy of being allowed to be imported under some kind of exemption. For example, New York City has a problem with rats. The Cubans have an incredible rat poison that is made as a biological.
Two-legged rats.
And they also have, I just recently here, they were spraying here recently for mosquitoes, for West Nile virus.
Right.
The Cubans have a mosquito larvicide that is much more environmentally friendly, made from scorpion poisoning.
Wait a minute. But I can see that going into the federal government, FDA, all kinds of approval. It'll go before the. It's crazy.
But this is not. It's not as. These products are biologicals. They're not as complicated as present the same kind of environmental hazards as chemicals, as the pesticides and rodenticides that we are using. I'm just using that as an example. There's a lot there to be discovered, and this is what I believe is going to happen now over this next phase of normalization. And people are going to be scratching their heads and going, this isn't logical.
1999, you started going there, you're attorney, you represented, some of the background is I know you've represented people on both sides. You've taken people there.
No, I don't represent anybody in Cuba, although you mentioned something very interesting. I've been approached by a private employed Cuban Paladar owner who wants to register his business in the United States. And when I asked him, why would you want me to represent you? Is the restaurant,
okay.
That's private land.
Okay.
He said to me, and this is what gives me hope for the future of Cuba, he says, I'm looking forward to the day when it becomes possible to have business partners. I have a branch of my restaurant in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. This is a Cuban national, lives in Cuba.
Wait a minute, how old is this Cuban, more or less?
He's middle-aged.
Middle age. So
Yes.
but he's a communist.
He's not a member of the Cuban Communist Party.
He's not.
No,
So there were people already in Cuba who say they want a partner. There's no problem with people.
There are people looking with that mindset. The problem is there isn't the structure in place yet to do it, or there are severe limitations where companies and people interested are going to have to hire folks like myself and others who know this and have the experience to figure out how to navigate this and also fight to make these changes.
Since 1999, 2015, we're in August. The changes that you have, what are the significant changes during that time period from your vantage point and taking businesses there and people who want to learn about Cuba to commerce with Cuba? What's been the major, besides the normalization?
You have very key moments in that timeline. In the year 2000, Congress passed an exception to the embargo allowing for U.S. to Cuba sales of food and agricultural products on a cash basis. And that really transformed the market there because our agricultural industry, and we rediscovered the fact that there is a market of 11 million people, 11.2 million people living on an island who have anywhere from 2 million to 4 million to probably now going into record numbers now with things opening up, who all need food products. What better than to have those food products coming from the United States? The quality is better, the costs are cheaper, and I remember going to the Aljibe restaurant, which is a must-stop for anybody going to Cuba because they have a very special chicken recipe, a chicken sauce that, well, it's unique and memorable. I remember going there and eating the rice at that time. The rice was from America. The black beans were grown in America. And the chicken that I was eating was grown in America.
Really?
Yeah. And so
they weren't like Purdue chickens or no.
Purdue, Tyson, all the major chicken companies have sold at one point in time, chicken to Cuba.
I go back to New York State. The trip that Governor Cuomo says, I hear that some legislators are going back. New York State legislators are going and planning a trip. I had, I think Carl Hasty and Marco Crespo and somebody else that are planning something. Is it farmers in certain parts of our state, those that, again, I go back to apples and those that are producing, the produce and then the people with the yogurt businesses, is there any chance this is going to happen in the next 5 years during Cuomo's governorship?
I think the key thing that has to happen for New York in order to become competitive is that we're competing with 50 states and we have a geographic disadvantage, which is we're up in the Northeast. And everything being shipped to Cuba primarily gets shipped out of Florida. And so anything that we would export to Cuba would have to be rail shipped down to Florida and then embarked from there. Once the New York Harbor is open, the Port Authority opens up shipping, that should bring prices down dramatically, enough to the point where it would make our agricultural products more competitively priced with others that they're buying. For example,
according to this list, right? So that it's permissible. New York State should be right now on a cash basis selling apples and getting other products sold in Cuba, right?
It is a yes. You could hypothetically sell any New York agricultural product to Cuba right now. But Cuba's got to put in the order. It's not just like
no, I understand.
But I'm saying it is legally possible from the U.S. to do that right now.
So there's 2 pages. So there's no reason why Governor Cuomo shouldn't get those farmers to sell their apples there.
Well, I hope the governor will use his authority as head of the Port Authority to get the commissioners there to open up shipping to Cuba.
Antonio C. Martinez II, attorney who has been really doing, I guess you're like an ambassador, unofficial ambassador.
New York's ambassador to Cuba, yeah, there you go.
Unbelievable.
Right.
You're not Cuban.
No.
You're of Dominican ancestry.
Yes.
We'll bring you back so we can talk about Haiti and Dominican Republic. No,
I'm happy.
I'm
I
only
think
kidding.
That's okay. No, I'm happy to talk about any of those Latin American countries because I believe that it is critical that we, transform our relationship with Latin America.
Which has been ignored by too many presidents.
Exactly.
For City and State TV, I'm Gerson Borrero. Catch you next time.